My father looked me dead in the eyes at my mother's funeral and said, "You were never really mine." He said it quietly, like it was just a fact, like the weather, like it didn't cost him anything to say it. I was 26 years old, standing next to my mother's casket, still wearing the black dress I had bought 3 hours earlier because I hadn't even had time to prepare. And those were the words he chose, not "I'm sorry for your loss," not "Are you okay?" Just that. Just a sentence designed to cut and walk away clean. That moment did not come out of nowhere. It was the loudest version of something my family had been whispering my entire life. I grew up knowing I was different in their eyes. I grew up watching my two brothers get birthday cards with money tucked inside while mine arrived empty or not at all. I grew up hearing my aunts go quiet when I walked into a room. I grew up with a father who could not look at me for longer than 3 seconds without his jaw tightening. For 28 years, I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself family was complicated. I told myself if I just worked harder, loved louder, caused less trouble, eventually I would earn the thing that my brothers got for free just by existing. I was wrong. And when I finally stopped trying to earn it, when I finally picked up that small plastic DNA kit and mailed it in without telling a single person, I was not prepared for what came back. Not because it confirmed what they always said about me, but because it proved that the person who spent my entire childhood making me feel like an outsider, the person who called me the affair child, the person who stood at my mother's funeral and tried to erase me one final time, was the one who had been lying all along. This is the story of what happened after that envelope arrived. And I need you to stay with me because it gets so much worse before it gets better. And then slowly, quietly, it becomes something I never expected. It becomes the most powerful moment of my life. Before I keep going, I want to ask you something real. If the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally made you spend your whole life proving you deserve to exist, how long would you have waited before you stopped trying? Because I waited 28 years. Some of you are going to think I waited too long. Some of you are going to understand exactly why I stayed. Drop your answer below because I genuinely want to know. And if this story hits something you have been carrying yourself, stay until the end, because the ending is not what I expected, and I think it might matter to you too. My name is Arya, and I am 31 years old. I have a small apartment that I painted myself, a job I worked hard to get, two plants that are somehow still alive, and a story that took me nearly 3 decades to fully understand. I am not telling it because I want sympathy. I am telling it because for a long time I thought the problem was me. I thought if I just understood it correctly, if I looked at it from the right angle, it would make sense. It would be fair. And I need someone else to hear it and tell me whether they see what I finally saw, because once I saw it, I could not unsee it. Let me take you back to the beginnings, not my beginnings, the beginning of the lie. My parents got married young. My mother Priya was 22, my father Devraj was 25. By all accounts, they were a good match on paper. Same community, same general family background, families who approved. My brothers Rohan and Nikhil came first. Rohan is 4 years older than me. Nikhil is 2 years older. Then I arrived, and from what I was told growing up, things shifted. I was told that my birth was complicated, that my mother had been going through a difficult time, that my father had been under a lot of pressure at work. These were the kinds of half sentences that adults use when they do not want to finish the story in front of a child. I did not understand what any of it really meant until I was about 8 years old, sitting in the back seat of my uncle's car while he and my father argued in the front thinking I was asleep. My uncle said something like, "You don't even know for sure, Devraj, you never even tried to find out." My father said, "I know enough." That was it, that was the whole conversation, but I filed it somewhere. Children do that. They do not understand what they are hearing, but they save it, and they carry it, and one day it opens up in their chest like something that was always waiting. Growing up, our house ran on a system I only recognized much later as having two tiers. My brothers were in one tier, I was in the other. My brothers got new school shoes every year. I got theirs when they outgrew them. My brothers had a corner of the living room dedicated to their trophies and certificates. Mine were kept in my bedroom, out of the shared space. When my father's colleagues came for dinner, my brothers were int. Rajust by name with a sentence attached. Rohan is going to be an engineer, or Nikhil just won the district chess championship. I was introduced as, and this is our daughter, with nothing after it. Sometimes not even that. Sometimes I was just the person who brought the tea tray out and went back to the kitchen. I am not trying to make this sound dramatic. I want to be accurate because for years I shrank these memories. I told myself every family had favorites. I told myself I was being too sensitive. But when you are a child in a house where love is distributed unevenly and no one will tell you why, you do not develop a theory, you develop a wound. And the wound just keeps getting touched, quietly, again and again, in 100 small ways that individually seem almost explainable, but together form a picture that is impossible to deny. The first time the word was used directly in front of me, I was 11. There was a big family gathering at my grandmother's house, a wedding anniversary party for my grandparents, my father's side. The whole extended family was there. There was food and music and a lot of noise. I was sitting near the kitchen doorway eating a plate of rice when I heard my Aunt Sunita talking to another woman whose name I never knew. They were not whispering. They must have assumed no one close enough was listening. Aunt Sunita said, the older two are clearly Devreds, you can see it in the face. But that younger one, Arya, she looks nothing like anyone in this family. Priya was always too friendly with everyone, you know. Devred should have done something about it years ago. Everyone knows she is the affair child. Affair child. I did not fully understand all of what that meant at 11. But I understood enough. I understood it meant I did not belong. I understood it meant my mother had done something wrong. I understood it meant the way my father looked at me, that tightening jaw, that distance, that half introduction at dinner parties was not random. It was intentional. It was a conclusion he had already reached about me before I was old enough to know there was a question being asked. I went to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub for a long time. I did not cry. I just sat very still, trying to understand what it meant to be something that should not have existed. When I came back out, the party continued as if nothing had happened. Nobody noticed I had been gone. I never told my mother what I heard that day. For a long time, I did not know why. Looking back now, I think I was protecting her. Even at 11, some part of me understood that if I repeated those words to her, something terrible would happen in our house and the fallout would land on me. So I kept it. I added it to the file I had been keeping since the back seat of my uncle's car. Middle school and high school were a careful kind of survival. I became very good at two things, doing well academically and making myself small at home. I do not mean small in a sad way, I mean I learned the geometry of our household. I knew which conversations to stay out of, I knew when my father's mood had shifted, I knew how to be present without drawing attention. I got good grades not because someone pushed me, but because achievement felt like the one thing I could control. If I could not make my father proud, at least I could make myself proud. At least my grades were mine. My mother, Priya, was the only warmth in the house that was unconditional. She was a quiet woman. She was not someone who fought loudly or made speeches, but she loved me without reservation. She braided my hair when I was small. She packed my lunch differently from my brother's, not in a special way, just in the way she knew I liked: small sandwiches cut into triangles, fruit on the side. She came to every school event even when my father did not. She sat in the front row. She clapped the loudest. I used to wonder sometimes if she knew what people said about me. I used to wonder if she knew what my father believed. She never spoke about it directly. But there were moments, small quiet moments, when she would hold my face in her hands and look at me like she was memorizing something, like she was storing it, like she knew time was limited and she wanted to have enough of me saved to last. I understand now that she knew everything. She just did not know how to fix it without breaking everything else. When I was 18, I left for university. My father paid for my brother's university fees directly. He paid the institution, handled the accommodation, set up their bank accounts, talked to their professors. When it was my turn, he gave me a number, not a large one, and told me the rest was on me. Not angrily, just flatly, like it was obvious, like it had always been the plan. I got a part-time job within the first week. I cleaned a university building 3 mornings a week at 5 in the morning. I applied for every scholarship the university offered. I ate a L out of rice and eggs and called my mother every Sunday because hearing her voice made the exhaustion feel smaller. I graduated with a first-class degree. My mother came to the ceremony. My father did not. He sent a card. The card said, "Congratulations." Nothing else. No, "I'm proud of you." No, "Well done." Just the one word, his signature, and a 50-pound note folded inside that felt more like a receipt than a gift. Rohan and Nikhil's graduation photos were framed and hung in the living room. Mine was on my mother's bedside table in a small plastic frame she bought herself. I did not say anything. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I did not need the wall. I had the memory. I had the degree. I had myself. After graduation, I got a job in a different city and I threw myself into building something. A flat, a career, a small circle of friends who knew nothing about where I came from and loved me without the weight of all that history. For the first time in my life, I lived somewhere that did not have a second tier, and I started to breathe differently. Not better, exactly, just differently. Like I had been slightly holding my breath for years and finally let some of it go. I called home every Sunday still. My mother's voice was the thread. My father and brothers and I had a surface-level relationship, birthdays acknowledged, holidays attended sometimes, the kind of family contact that looks fine from the outside. Then my mother got sick. She was diagnosed with a serious illness when I was 24. I will not describe the full medical details because that is her story more than mine. What I will tell you is that she declined faster than any of us expected. Within 18 months, she was gone. Those 18 months changed everything. I moved back home to help care for her. I took a leave of absence from my job. I drove her to appointments. I managed her medications. I sat with her through the nights when the pain was bad. I did not do this because I wanted recognition. I did it because she was my mother and she had always shown up for me, and I was not going to let her face this alone. My brothers visited. They visited respectably. Weekend trips. Phone calls on Tuesday evenings. They had careers and families and lives, which I understood. I am not blaming them for being less present, but I was there every single day. I rearranged my entire life and moved it into her house. My father was in the house during this time as well, of course, and I want to say that he was not cruel during those 18 months. He was simply absent in the way he had always been absent from me. He focused on my mother, he was present for her. But in the spaces between that presence where I was doing the work, coordinating with nurses, filling prescriptions, managing the household so that he could just focus on being a husband, he said almost nothing to me. Not a thank you. Not an acknowledgement. We existed in the same house in parallel lines that never touched. One afternoon, about 4 months before my mother died, she asked me to close the bedroom door. My father was out. She looked at me with the expression I recognized, the one where she was memorizing me, and she said, "Arya, there are things I should have said a long time ago. Things I should have fought harder about. I need you to know that none of what this family has believed about you is your fault, and none of it is true." I asked her what she meant. She said she could not explain all of it. She was too tired. But she said, "When I am gone, do not let them erase you. You belong in this family more than any of them understand. I need you to promise me you will not just disappear when I am gone." I promised. She died 6 weeks after that conversation, not 4 months, 6 weeks. She declined faster at the end. The day of the funeral was the day my father said those words to me. You already know what he said, but let me tell you what happened around those words because context matters. The funeral was a large gathering. Extended family, family friends, community members, neighbors. My mother was well loved. People came from several hours away. I had organized a significant portion of the funeral arrangements because someone had to. I had ordered the flowers, confirmed the religious ceremony details, arranged the catering for afterward, coordinated with the venue. Again, not for recognition, just because it needed to happen and I was there. During the funeral itself, my father sat between Rohan and Nikhil. There was a fourth chair in the family row. I found a seat 2 rows back. I told myself it was fine. Maybe it was a seating mix-up. Maybe no one had thought about it. I focused on getting through the service. Afterward, outside, when people were gathering in small groups, my father came to find me. I thought maybe he wanted to thank me. Or maybe just acknowledge that I had been there, that I had helped, that I was his daughter, and we had just lost someone we both oved. Instead, he said, "You were never really mine," quietly, factually. Then he walked away to accept condolences from a group of his colleagues. I stood very still for a moment, and then I did something I had never done before in my adult life. I did not apologize, I did not cry, I did not follow him to explain or plead or beg him to take it back. I stood still, and somewhere inside me, something very old and very tired made a decision. I was done. Not dramatically, not in a way that required an announcement, just done. The way you put something down when your arms have been full for too long. I went back to my flat, I took a week of quiet, and then I ordered a DNA testing kit online. I want to be honest about what I expected when I ordered it. I think part of me expected it to confirm what they had always said. That I was not Devrad's biological daughter, that there was some version of a truth in the story my family had told about me my entire life. I was not ordering the kit to win anything. I was ordering it because I deserved to know, not them, me. I deserved to know my own origins, separate from whatever story they had decided to tell about it. I sent my sample off. I waited. The wait was about 3.5 weeks, and during those weeks I went back to my job. I cooked my own food, I walked in the evenings, and I did not call home once. The Sunday thread had broken. For the first time in my adult life, Sunday came and went, and I did not pick up the phone. I noticed I did not feel guilty about it. I noticed I felt quiet. Then the results arrived. I was at work when the email came through. I did not open it at work. I waited until I was home, sitting on my sofa with a cup of tea, because something told me I needed to be somewhere steady when I read it. I opened the email, I read the results. And I sat with my tea getting cold for a very long time. The test confirmed that I am 100% the biological child of Devraj, my father, the man who stood at my mother's funeral and told me I was never really his. The man who for 28 years had treated me as a second-tier daughter, had allowed his family to call me an affair child, had watched me be excluded and minimized and quietly erased while he said nothing, did nothing, and in many ways participated actively in the exclusion. He is my father. Biologically, factually, undeniably. The story he had told and the story his family had told and the story I had grown up submerged in was not just wrong. It was a complete lie. I put my phone down, I picked it up, I put it down again. I did not call him that night. I did not call Rohan or Nikhil. I did not post anything. I did not do anything at all except sit with what I now knew and try to understand its shape. What I understood first was this: my mother had never had an affair. Whatever suspicion my father had built his distance on, whatever story he had decided was true, whatever conversation he had or had not had with my mother when I was too young to know, the conclusion he reached was wrong. And he had let that wrong conclusion run for 28 years without checking it, without a single test, without one honest conversation. He had decided, and then he had organized a family around that decision, and then he had sat with me at my mother's funeral and spoken the lie out loud one final time as though it were kindness. The second thing I understood was harder. Whatever my mother had tried to communicate to me in her final months, whatever she had meant when she said the family had believed things about me that were not true and not my fault, she had been carrying this her whole adult life. She had lived in a house where her husband quietly believed she had betrayed him, where her extended family whispered about her youngest daughter's paternity at anniversary parties, where her daughter grew up in a second tier she could not explain and could not correct. And she had carried it alone and died carrying it, and the only person left who could do anything about it now was me. I took a few days, then I called a solicitor. Not because I wanted to sue anyone, not because I had some legal case clearly mapped out. I called because my mother had told me not to let them erase me, and now I knew that the reason they had been trying to erase me for 28 years was based on something false, and I needed to understand what, if anything, I was entitled to now that I had proof. The solicitor was a woman named Claire. She was calm and practical, and she did not offer opinions about my family. She just asked questions and listened. I told her everything. I showed her the DNA results on my phone. She looked at them. She said, "This is significant. There are potential implications here depending on whether there is a will, what it says, and whether any estate decisions were made that you were excluded from." That word estate opened something I had not thought about clearly. My mother had a small inheritance from her own parents. She had also been working for the latter part of her life and had savings. I did not know the details of what she had left behind or how it was arranged. I had been so focused on caring for her and then surviving the grief that I had not asked any practical questions about finances. I had assumed, honestly, that she would have made sure I was included in anything she left behind. I asked Claire if she could help me find out. She said she could. What we discovered over the following 2 weeks was not what I expected. My mother had, in fact, written a will. It had been updated twice. The most recent version had been written just under a year before her death. The will left her personal savings divided equally among 3 children, which included me. It also specified some personal items for me specifically, things she knew mattered to me. But when I looked at the documentation more carefully, something was wrong. The estate had already been in process of being settled. Rohan had been appointed executor. The division I had been quoted when Rohan had mentioned it once briefly by text message shortly after the funeral did not match what the will described. The number I had been given was lower, not dramatically lower, lower in a way that might seem like an administrative rounding or a fee deduction if you were not looking carefully. But when placed against the actual will, it was lower in a way that did not match any fee or tax or deduction I could account for. I brought this to Claire. She looked at it carefully. She said she would write to the executor requesting a full account breakdown. I want to be very clear about something here. I was not angry yet. I was not in revenge mode. I was in information mode, because something my mother had said stuck with me: do not let them erase you. And something very quiet and very methodical in me had decided that the way to honor that was to simply see clearly, to stop looking away, to stop giving the benefit of the doubt to people who had used every benefit I had ever offered them. Rohan's response to Claire's letter arrived 11 days later. It was a 3-paragraph message that essentially said the estate was being settled, everything was being handled appropriately, and that any questions could be directed to him directly. It did not include a breakdown. It did not reference the discrepancy. It treated the formal legal request as though it were a nosy younger sister sticking her nose in. Claire sent a second letter, more formal, requesting specific line-item documentation. Around the same time, something else happened. My father called me. It was a Sunday. I noticed that. My old Sunday, he called in the late afternoon. I almost did not answer, then I answered. He asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. He said he had been thinking. He said the things had been difficult lately. He said he thought maybe I had been feeling distant and he wanted to reach out. He said he hoped I was taking care of myself. He did not mention what he had said at the funeral. He did not apologize. He did not acknowledge any of the 28 years. He spoke to me the way someone speaks when they want to reestablish contact without paying the cost of what broke it. I said very little. I said I was well. I said I had been doing some thinking too. I said there were some administrative matters related to my mother's estate that I wanted to make sure were resolved properly. He said, yes, of course, Rohan is handling all of that. I said I was aware. I said I was in touch with a solicitor. There was a pause, a long one. He said, a solicitor, is that really necessary? I said yes. He said he would talk to Rohan. We said goodbye. The call lasted 9 minutes. And in those 9 minutes, the dynamic between us shifted in a way I could feel but could not yet fully name. It was the first time I had ever been on the phone with my father and not been the one who was nervous. 3 days after that call, Rohan called me. He did not call from the number he usually used. He called from a landline I almost did not pick up. He was warm in a way he had rarely been with me. He asked if he could explain the estate breakdown. He said there had been some costs associated with the funeral, some administrative fees, some deductions for things that had been handled before the will process formally started. He said if I had questions, he was happy to walk me through it. I said I had sent a formal request through my solicitor and I would like the documentation sent there. He said that seemed like an overreaction. I said I disagreed. He said this was a family matter. I said I agreed, which is why I wanted it done properly. Another pause. He said, Arya, I don't know what you think is going on here. I said, I think there may be a discrepancy between what the will specifies and what I have been offered. I want to understand it, that's all. He said he would send the documents. They are Rev. Ed through Claire 5 days later. She went through them carefully. Her conclusion was that there were deductions that were not standard. One in particular was listed as a property management advance that she could not account for against any legitimate estate expense. It was not enormous, but it was real. It was documented with internal paperwork that did not align with any invoice or third-party record. She said to me, this is worth pursuing. It may be a misunderstanding, it may be something else, but you are right to ask. I said, go ahead. While all of this was happening with the estate, something else was developing in the background, something I had been carrying quietly since the night the DNA results came through. I had told no one about the results, not Claire, not my friends, not anyone. I had been sitting with this information alone for weeks. The question I kept asking myself was, what do I do with it? Not in a vengeful sense, genuinely. What does a person do when they discover that the narrative that defined their childhood was false? When the justification for 28 years of a second-tier life turns out to be a lie? When the man who chose to believe a story without ever fact-checking it is still alive, still functioning, still talking to you like the history is something both of you should politely overlook? I thought about my mother, I thought about what she had carried, I thought about that sentence. None of what this family believed about you is your fault and none of it is true. She had known. She had known and she had not been able to fix it, or she had not known how, or she had been so exhausted by the weight of it that she had just tried to love me loudly enough to drown out the noise. I thought about my grandmother's anniversary party, Aunt Sunita at the kitchen doorway, the affair child. I thought about the funeral seating, the fourth chair in the family row, 2 rows back. I thought about the graduation photos, the wall and the bedside table. I thought about my father on the phone, 9 minutes, asking if a solicitor was really necessary. And then I made a decision, not about revenge, about honesty. I was going to tell them. Not dramatically, not at a dinner table with a speech prepared. I was going to tell them the way you tell someone a fact, because that is what it was, a fact. My fact, which they had stolen from me and replaced with their version. I was going to give it back to myself by saying it clearly. I called my father, this time I was ready. I told him I had done a DNA test. I told him the results had come back. I told him what the results said. I told him calmly with no yelling, no crying, no asking him how he could have done this. I just told him the truth that the test had confirmed, that I was his biological daughter, that I had always been his biological daughter, that the thing he had believed and allowed his entire family to build a story around for 28 years was incorrect. There was a silence on the line. Then he said, that cannot be right. I said it was. I said I would send him a copy of the report if he wanted to see it. He said nothing for a moment, then he said, your mother was, and then he stopped. I said, my mother is not here to defend herself, but the science is. Another silence. He said he would need time to think. I said that was fine. I said I would be here. I ended the call. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. 2 days later, Rohan called me, not from the landline this time, from his usual number. His voice was different. The warmth was gone, replaced by something that was trying to be authoritative but sounded like someone who had just been handed information they did not know how to hold. He said, Dad told me what you said about the test. I said yes. He said, did you actually do this, a real DNA test? I said yes. I told him the name of the service, the accreditation level, the date I had submitted. I was clear. He said, and it said you are definitely Dad's. I said yes. He went quiet, then he said, that doesn't change anything, Arya. And that sentence, that small, defensive, cornered sentence, was the one that finally made me understand the full shape of what I had been living inside. He did not say, I am sorry. He did not say, we owe you an apology. He did not say, I cannot believe we treated you that way if this is true. He said that does not change anything, which meant that even confronted with the truth, even with the ground shifting under all of them, his first instinct was not remorse, it was territory protection. I said it changes something for me. And I ended the call. I did not sleep well that night, but not because I was sad. I was processing. I was feeling the full weight of what 28 years of a false story had cost me, and I was also feeling, for the first time, entirely free of the obligation to protect the people who had told it. The estate matter continued to develop, Claire P. Ushed back formally on the property management advance that could not be documented. The solicitor representing the estate responded, and this time the tone was more conciliatory. A correction was offered. The phrasing was an error in accounting. The corrected amount was offered in writing. It was not a dramatic sum, but it was the principle. It was my mother's intention, written in a document she had made while she was alive to share what she had equally with her 3 children. And the first attempt at settling that estate had quietly reduced my share, without explanation, without disclosure, and it had only been corrected when I pushed. This told me something about how things had been running, not just in the estate, in the whole system. When I pushed, things moved. When I accepted, things stayed the same or quietly shifted away from me. The whole structure had been operating on the assumption that I would not look closely, that I would receive what I was given, that I would be grateful. When the corrected payment came through, I sat with it for a moment. It was not about the money, it was about the pattern it confirmed. The pattern that had run my entire life, that I had excused and explained and absorbed and adapted to, was real. I had not imagined it, I had not been dramatic. The second tier had been real and deliberate and sustained by the people around me. Then the Aunt Sunita situation happened. I had not thought about my father's extended family much in all of this. I had been focused on my father, my brothers, the estate. But Aunt Sunita, the woman from the kitchen doorway at my grandmother's anniversary party 20 years earlier, apparently learned through the family chain about the DNA results, because she called me. She called me on a Thursday afternoon and I almost did not answer. She said, "Arya, I have heard some things and I want you to know I always thought." She stopped herself. She started again. She said, "I want you to know that in these situations it is easy to jump to wrong conclusions and no one meant any harm." I said, "You called me the affair child at my grandparents' anniversary party. I was 11 years old. I was sitting outside the kitchen door eating rice. You said it to another woman and you did not whisper." There was a very long silence. She said, "You were not supposed to hear that." I said, "I know." She said, "Arya, surely you understand that at the time people thought." I said, "I understand exactly what people thought. I also understand that it was wrong. And that knowing it might have been wrong was never enough of a reason for anyone to check, or to apologize to me, or to treat me differently while they were uncertain." She said she was sorry. She said it quickly, like she was handing me something just to clear her hands of it. I said, "Thank you for calling." I ended the call. I did not feel satisfied by it. I did not feel angry either. I felt a kind of cool clarity that had been building steadily for weeks. It was not triumph. It was more like standing somewhere high up and being able to see a long distance. My father called again about 10 days after I had told him the DNA results. He was different this time, quieter. He said he had been doing some thinking. He said he had spoken with someone, I think a religious figure or a community elder, though he did not say who. He said he was finding things difficult. I said I imagined he was. He said, "I never wanted things to be the way they were for you." I said, "You allowed them to be." He said, "I was convinced that." I said, "I know what you were convinced of, but you were never sure. Your brother told you as much when I was a child. You said you knew enough. You chose enough over the truth for 28 years, and now you have the truth." He was quiet. He said, "Is there a way to?" I said, "I don't know yet. Right now I am focused on my own life. I am not ready to sit across from you and talk about what a relationship looks like going forward. I might get there, but I need time." He said he understood. I said goodbye. It was not the dramatic confrontation I think some people expect from stories like this. There was no table flipping. There was no screaming. There was no speech I had rehearsed in a mirror. There was just a woman on the phone with her father who had hurt her for 28 years on the basis of something that was not true, telling him clearly and calmly that she was not ready to pretend the hurt did not exist. Nikhil, my middle brother, was the last one to reach out. He called about 3 weeks after all of this. He and I had always had the most neutral relationship. Not warm, not hostile, just existing alongside each other. He called and said, "I just want you to know that I hear you. I don't know what to do with any of this, but I hear you." That was it. That was what he said. And I think it was the most honest thing any of them said to me in the whole of this. I said, "Thank you, Nika." Well, he said, "I'm sorry I wasn't a better brother." I said, "I know." We hung up. I think that might have been the beginning of something different between us. I do not know yet. These things take time. What happened in the weeks after was quieter. There was no single dramatic resolution. Life does not usually give those. What there was instead was a series of things ending and a series of things beginning. The estate was settled correctly. My mother's wishes were honored. The things she had left specifically for me arrived in a box sent by Rohan, not delivered personally, just sent in a box. Inside was the small plastic picture frame from her bedside table. My graduation photo was still in it. There was also a letter. It was short, in her handwriting, which I had not seen in months. I will not repeat what it said because it is mine. But she had written it, I learned, during those final weeks. She had given it to Rohan with instructions to put it in the box with my things after everything was settled, which told me she had trusted him with something real, even if his execution of other things had been imperfect. She had made sure that letter reached me. She had planned it even in her last weeks. That was who she was. I framed the letter. It hangs next to my graduation photo in my flat, not on a wall that anyone else assigned to me, on my wall in my space. My relationship with my father remains complicated, which is a word I am using carefully because it is the most accurate one. He is not someone I have written off, but he is also not someone I have forgiven entirely, and I think the difference between those two things matters. Writing someone off is a decision about them. Forgiveness is a decision about you. I am working on the forgiveness part, slowly, on my own timeline. Not because anyone has asked me to or because any of them have done enough to warrant it, but because I know that carrying the full weight of what was done to me is something I would do to myself, not to them. And I have spent enough of my life carrying things that were not mine. Aunt Sunita sent a card at Christmas. First one I had ever received from her, I put it in a drawer. Rohan and I communicate about once a month. It is surface level. He has not apologized in words, but he responds more carefully now. He checks his tone. It is not reconciliation. It is the beginning of what might someday be something better if we both do the work. I went back to my job fully. I got a promotion 6 months later. I have been going to therapy once a week for the past year, and it has been one of the best decisions of my adult life. I have been told by more than one person in my life that I seem lighter, and I think that is accurate. I am not unbroken, but the weight is different. The DNA kit sits in a drawer somewhere. I do not look at it, I do not need to. What it contained is in me now, not as a wound, not as a weapon, as a fact. I am Arya, I am my father's biological daughter. I am my mother's child in every way that has ever mattered. I was not the affair child. I was the child who was told she was for 28 years by people who did not love her correctly. And I am the person who finally, at 31, with a plastic kit and a correct envelope and a solicitor named Claire and a letter in a box and a graduation photo on a wall that no one assigned me, became undeniably, quietly, finally her own. I end reflection CTA paragraph. If you made it to the end of this story, I want to ask you one more thing. How long did the people in your life make you prove something before you realized the proof was never going to be enough? Because sometimes the bravest thing is not the dramatic confrontation. It is the quiet decision to stop auditioning for love you were always supposed to have for free. If that landed anywhere real for you, tell me in the comments. And if you know someone carrying something like what Arya carried, share this with them, not so they feel seen by a story, but so they know that the decision to stop shrinking is always available, no matter how long the shrinking has been going on.